These conversations are brought to you by the Lad Group, Ben's leading real estate team. Help continue this Ben Beat conversation by subscribing, sharing, and leaving us a review.
So good. I have the blueberry mint zero.
Peach probiotic water.
Peach probiotic.
Yeehaw.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Cheers.
Cheers.
So with us today, we have Eric Platenberg and Mitchell, co-founders of Humm Kombucha. So I've been wanting to do this interview a long time. I'm excited that you guys took the time. Thank you for doing that.
Thanks for putting this together.
Yeah.
Tell me a little bit about the space we're in now. This was where you went from your house to your brewery, right?
Exactly. There was one other in between space just around the road, but this was definitely our first proper brewery. And we are actually sitting kind of in between where the fermenters were and the bottling line was right here. We're right on the drain line.
Really? Okay.
Yeah, so we brewed in this space we actually transitioned from Kombucha Mama to Humm in this space. Mm-hmm. We moved out of here. We've been in Brinson now for 5 years, but this was our first home as Humm Kombucha.
Okay, so to go back, and I ran into you in the parking lot this morning, and I asked you, I thought I ran into you in 2009 in the farmer's market, but it might have been your co-founder, Jamie.
That's right.
You know, and just for our listeners, in Bend, everyone knows what kombucha is, right? But maybe not. Tell me a little bit about Kombucha Mama and just kind of how you came about, creating this beverage.
Yeah, well, Kombucha Mama started in 2009. We moved out here in 2008, mm-hmm. and it started kind of on a whim. I wasn't working at the time. We'd been traveling around the world for 3 years, and we ended up in Bend, Oregon, and Eric had a job and I didn't. Yeah. And I actually learned how to brew kombucha from Eric's mom.
Yeah, so my mom taught me how to make kombucha like 30 years ago.
Okay.
And we just made it 1 gallon at a time for ourselves for literally 20 years. And if you do anything for 20 years, hopefully you get good at it.
Yeah.
So literally nobody knew what kombucha was, nor how to make it. So through experimentation, and a lot of it was accidental, it just changed and morphed. So 20 years later, I'm making pretty good kombucha. Yeah. And when we moved to Bend, Michelle and Jamie took it to the farmer's market, took it door to door.
Oh, how fun.
Yeah, we had, we would put gallon glass jars, full gallon glass jars on people's doormat. They'd have $20 under the mat with an empty gallon glass jar, and we'd put it in the Prius and take it back and refill it in the garage. I mean, we were in our garage, our kitchen, and then the garage for the first year of the business, really.
I think what's super relevant about the story as it relates to this podcast is we had been in town for 6 weeks when all this started. Like Jamie and Michelle met each other playing tennis at the athletic club. Yeah. And I'll never forget, Michelle comes home and she's like, I met the most amazing woman today. Yeah. Well, cool. What are you going to do? We're going to start a business. We've been here like 2 weeks. Yeah. So it was a lot of fun. And I was like, great. What are you going to do? And they both said, well, we have no idea, but it's going to be awesome. We're going to do something cool with organic products or this. And they literally whiteboarded 20 different ideas at our kitchen table. I was the chief sandwich maker. I would make them lunch while they're doing their thing. And one day Michelle was like, hey, Jamie, do you want some kombucha? And Jamie's like, what's kombucha? Yeah. So I pull it out and I'm like, we make it, and it's got probiotics. It's really healthy. We've been making it a long time. Jamie takes one sip of the kombucha and goes, I can sell this to everybody. Yep. And that's how it started.
That is how it started. And I thought, that's great. I don't actually want to sell anything, but I can make a lot of it. So
at that time, was there anyone that was doing kombucha on a mass scale?
Yeah, GTs.
But mass scale is really there's an asterisk on that.
That's fair.
Yeah. They were just starting with national distribution. I had drank kombucha once commercially ever at that point. You never saw it. Bend didn't have any kombucha. San Francisco didn't really have any kombucha. There was some down in LA and some in Denver.
Okay.
Yeah. That's right. And there were just a few places. I mean, it was sold at Whole Foods or other natural channels. Yeah. But at the time, kombucha, to Eric's point, nobody knew what it was. They had no idea. And so it was really hey, let's do this a little bit differently. Yep. Let's bring it to the masses. Everybody went left in natural foods, which is awesome. We went right into more of mainstream. We tried to make it taste more mainstream and just bring it to
You sound very Republican right now.
That's not what I mean. But now, I mean,
it's approachable.
It is, yeah.
I mean, because the
there's a
kombuchas
lot
that
of
I had tasted prior to that were, a bottle of something slimy that goes down your throat and you're choking and you're like, whoa,
right.
It's just a little too much for a newcomer to
right.
kombucha. Right?
Yeah.
Well, and I don't mean to harsh on people that make kombucha like that, but most of them have been making it for a year or 2 or 3.
Yeah.
And, most of the founders of the other companies, GT aside, were really new to kombucha. Right. And it matters what kind of tea you use. Yeah. It matters the temperature of the room. And all these things we found out by accident over 20 years.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, let's take a step back because we can definitely go down the kombucha rabbit hole.
Yeah.
But in researching both of you, I was trying to kind of get an understanding of who you are. It absolutely bleeds optimism and positivity. And so your LinkedIn profile, and I thought it was probably the most accurate description, is you said, is it possible to create business, the place where adults spend most of their waking hours, where we take care of each other? Is the business world ready to be treated like we treat our closest friends and family? Can it be a thriving community where we all have each other's back and we support our family at the same time? This is what we asked ourselves in 2009 in the middle of the recession in Bend, Oregon. Turns out it's possible.
Yeah.
That's real.
It is real. Thanks for reading that to me. I'm not actually on LinkedIn very much. I'm like, I did write that. I did. It is. That is very core to who I am, and that is actually. I know we're stepping away from kombucha, but that was the question at the kitchen table. It was, hey, can we create a business that treats each other in a way that we treat our closest friends and family? Can we take care of each other like a mother takes care of her child, is really what the question was. And it was a question. It was a legitimate question. We didn't know if it was a yes or a no.
Yeah.
I believed that it was possible because I actually saw Eric do it in his business prior to moving out here. Eric was a huge inspiration for me in the way of starting Humm, Kombucha Mama at the time, because most of the people that I was surrounded by worked for the paycheck and didn't really love it. And, it was what it was. But the people that worked with Eric it was called Freedom Personal Development. They loved it. They were really genuinely happy and they were thriving and they were excited to be there. And, not every day was rainbows and unicorns, but they loved it. And I thought, okay, this is possible. We can do it.
Yep.
And that was my reason for starting the company. Yeah, we happen to sell kombucha. We make a great kombucha and all that stuff, but it wasn't about the kombucha. It was really, for me, it was about the space that we were creating and just an extension of what I believe.
Well, I wouldn't say most businesses are founded on that. That's amazing that you came about it from that angle, because it's rare in business to have a leader of a business that created a business on that ethos. I've never seen it.
I was inspired, for sure.
And so let's talk about that in Bend. How did Bend foster that sentiment? Was Bend critical? Was the people, the energy critical to actually being able to take that vision and to launch it?
Oh, they were amazing. I think I've said, I don't know, 1,000 times, like, we wouldn't be where we are if it weren't for this community. This community helped grow our company, helped grow our bit. Like, we didn't know anything. We knew how to make kombucha, but we knew how to do it in gallon glass jars, and we didn't know.
One of the breweries, when they were just going from these big jugs to bottles, it's really hard to get things like bottles and some of the packaging materials. And they literally were like, here, just take a pallet of our bottles, pay us when you can, but get started. And then, people over at the brew shop.
Silver Moon.
Yeah, that was Silver Moon. And people over at the brew shop were like, hey, take this refrigerator space so that your stuff, this happened. You could easily trace the dots to 20 Bend businesses that were materially supportive of getting the business off the ground.
Absolutely. Like, I remember sitting down with Jay over at Jackson's Corner and just being, because we were hanging up signs. Hey, do you want to feel better? Give us a call. We're going to deliver these kombucha things to your door. And then we were hanging them up at Jackson's, and Jay was like, hey, can I buy it for the restaurant and just serve it by the glass? And we were kind of like, yep. Okay, now we're going to need to go down like a wholesale and retail path. How do we do that? And he really sat us down and kind of gave us a 101 on how it worked, at least in the restaurant business. We did the same thing at Newport Market with how to do this in the grocery business. And, you know, I mean, Gary from Deschutes is still on our board. Like, he continues to be a wealth of information. Like, we got so much help. At the farmer's market, you were talking about the farmer's market. So we made one base tea. It was the base tea that Eric's mom started and Eric kind of perfected over the years, and then we worked on it. And then we got fresh squeezed juices from Mother's, and we had them in pumps. And people would just do pumps of pomegranate and lemons. And then lo and behold, there's pomegranate lemonade. Like, the pumps that were the most popular were the ones that we eventually started putting in bottles. There's so much help.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
I've never heard that. So, okay. Well, that is
community R&D.
So community R&D. So why Bend? You know, let's talk about your guys' origin story. What attracted you here? Because I think it's going to be relevant to what we'll talk about here in a second.
Yeah, we both grew up in the Midwest, and we were living in Wisconsin when we got married. And Wisconsin's great. I loved it. I went to the University of Wisconsin. Madison's a great town. And then it's really a long winter, and it's really flat. And we both wanted to be near mountains and rivers and the West Coast and the ocean and all that. So we put 25 towns on a piece of paper that were kind of all the usual suspects. Near an airport, around 100,000 people, access to skiing, access to the outdoors. Good people. And we took 3 years to travel around and spent a month here, 6 weeks there. We were overseas a lot of this time as well. And Bend was just a walk away winner. Like, the second choice was like a long way away. And it was because of the people. It was because of the school systems and the vibe and the entrepreneur scene. And one of our really, really good friends, in fact, the first time I was driving here, I was on the phone with my favorite uncle. And he's like, "What are you doing?" "I'm going to Bend, Oregon." And he's like, "Hey, you got to look up Ron Ross, who is a realtor here in town, has lived here 30 some years." And we got to meet Ron right away and asked him about the town. And one of the first things he said to us is that Bend has been 3 different towns since I've lived here. And it's probably going to be 3 more towns, before I die. And it's a really, really great attitude and a great perspective of looking at it, because if you came here when it was 15,000 people, that's a radically different town than at 30,000. And the town at 30 or 50,000 is different than it is today. And it's going to be different again in 10 years. And I think you have a choice. You either embrace that, enjoy it, and go along for the ride, or you look for a new place to move.
Right.
Those are kind of the options. And like Ron has really appreciated the differences. And Bend is different from when we moved here. And I'm not going anywhere. I love it here.
Yeah, I think that's really well said.
Yeah.
I do remember a fun story. Like, when we first were looking at Bend, we were here for 6 weeks in the summer.
Yeah.
And we were walking down, I think it's Riverside. I think that's the name of the street, right? Riverside. In between Drake Park and headed to the Old Mill. And and there was a guy just like out in his garden, his flower bed or whatever. He goes, "Hey, you guys going to the concert?" And we're like, "What?" He goes, "On Sunday, the free concerts. You going to the concert?" We're like, "Yes."
We were walking towards what used to be the Les Schwab Amphitheater. We were kind of walking that way.
Yeah.
And we're like, "No, what concert?"
Yeah. And he told us, and we're like, "Oh, that sounds great." He goes, "Hey, and he had his leg like in a cast or whatever, and he goes, "Hey, you guys look like you might enjoy the water. Do you like getting out on boats? Do you like kayaks?" And Eric's an incredible kayaker. And we're like, "Yeah, we like kayaks."
We're like, "Yeah, we like kayaking." He's like, "Come on back, like hop in my kayak."
He goes, "I can't ride it right now. I just had this surgery. They're just getting dry. You may as well just go in, paddle on up the stream, and watch the concert." We were like, "What?"
Yeah,
So you paddled up and borrowed kayaks.
Like that was
90 seconds.
That was like week 1 in Bend.
Yeah, and we knew this is our place,
Yeah, super fun.
So.
Well, the way you talked about how Bend goes through all those iterations and it's consistently changing is probably the best. I'm going to have to go back and listen to how you said that. That is probably one of the most succinct and accurate ways of describing how Bend continually reinvents itself. But change is scary.
Sure.
And there's a lot of people that are fearful of that change. And in my business, I welcome a lot of new people to town. And everyone has their own version of what Bend is. Their snapshot in time of what Bend is. And it's perfect for them at their level, whether it's 10,000 people, 50,000 people, 100,000 people, etc. How would you have that conversation with someone who comes and says, it's perfect, not one more home needs to be built, it's exactly the way it needs to be, the door's closed? You know, what would the conversation you'd have with that person?
Well, I would say move to the Midwest. Because like the town I grew up in, Green Bay, it was 100,000 people in the 70s, it's 100,000 people in the 80s, it's 100,000 people today, it'll probably be 100,000 people in 20 years.
Yeah.
So that's there's places that stay the same, there's places that are really dynamic and change. And the way that I look at it personally, I have, we have actually a 9-year-old and a 12-year-old. And my relationship with my little dude right now is so good. He's so awesome and so much fun. And the little girl May is amazing. And puberty is like right around the door. Yeah. And for me to go, okay, I just want to freeze them. I think they're perfect the way they are and they're not going to change and I don't want them to change. I mean, that's a ridiculous mindset for a dad to be in. Like what I'm doing is I am enjoying it. I am loving it. I'm connecting with them. I'm trying to dig as deep of a foundation as I can because big change is coming. They're going to be adults before I know it. I approach my relationship with Bend in the same way. Like I love Bend right now. Yeah. And then for me to think that Bend isn't going to change in 10 years is kind of a ridiculous thought. Bend will change unless it doesn't, unless it goes the way of other towns that become stagnant. Yeah. But growing, interesting towns do change. That's why people move here, is because it's growing and interesting. Yep. So what I want to do is I want to make the foundation here as strong as I can so that I want to live here in 10 years.
So be part of that change.
Be part of it, yeah.
Be part of the conversation.
Yeah, and add value. You know, and then how you're part of the conversation is different for everybody. I'm not very involved civically. You know, I don't go to the meetings, the city council meetings. I vote, but I'm not really engaged with the Chamber of Commerce. And I think that these things are all great. I'm not negative on that. I've just been really head down in creating jobs and helping the schools and, you know, doing what I do, which is, I think, a contribution. Yeah. And then it's different, you know, so some people are out in the parks, you know, doing cleanup or restoration, and that's really great. I actually don't do a lot of that, although I appreciate it. So I think that we can all play a role that we play in, and it doesn't mean, you know, being very political or being very environmental or being very commercial or whatever it is. It means like making a contribution however it's made.
Brian Ladd here. I hope you're enjoying the conversation and find this dialogue relevant to really what it means to live and work and play in this amazing community. As Ben's leading real estate team, we take our role seriously in representing both buyers and sellers at the absolute highest standards of our industry. For more information on how we can help, feel free to visit our website at benpropertysource.com or text LADD1, LADD1 to 88,000.
You mentioned there's an inflection point. It grows or it doesn't. So we're at a point where, so when I moved here, the median price of the house was $220,000. We just crossed $775,000.
Unreal.
So let's talk about that. Like, are we at an inflection point where the next Humm, could it grow? You know, can you find employees that can afford housing? You know, like, I think from my myopic view through real estate, that's the biggest, you know, pinch point for future innovation is kind of where we're at with cost of living in this town.
Yeah.
You know, do you see the environment different for the next Humm?
That's a great question. I think that it really depends on the business itself and how it's set up. You know, one thing that we've learned from the pandemic is that people can actually work from their homes and be on Zoom calls, and you can get really great people that don't actually live in the same community, but form a community around an idea that starts here. Maybe you have a handful of people here and the rest of it is outside of here. I don't know that I don't think that I don't think it would look the same as it's set up today, simply by virtue of what you're saying. It is hard for people to afford housing here. So it wouldn't be the same, but I believe that it's possible. There's an iteration that works, and what that looks like, we will see.
Yep.
Yeah.
So it's that optimistic attitude that pervades everything you guys you touch and do. Where's the business now? So, I don't know if it's an amount of bottles or cans or gallons or volume, but how would you define the size of the business right now?
Well, I think we're a mid-sized business.
Yeah.
We've grown from a kitchen table to employing 87 people and being across the whole country. And I think that at some point we will look to partner with somebody that can take the business further. We're not there yet today, but that is definitely something that is on the horizon, or that we are working toward and looking toward. And that'll be a fun part of the ride too. I love what Eric said about change and how he describes change. It's easy to use the analogy of the kids for me as well. For me, every single age for them has been my favorite age. I'm like, they're at my favorite age. And I've said that every year. It's still my favorite. I might not say that when they're teenagers. I don't know, but I think I probably am going to say that. I've said it for, the last decade or so, but I think that it's the same with our business. It's so different now, so different than it was at the kitchen table with the three of us, and there's been a lot of iterations in between, and I have to look forward to the next iteration, because if not, what am I doing? Why am I showing up? So
could you have imagined, when you were sitting at the kitchen table, could you have imagined this?
I don't think I went quite that far. He could, though, for sure. I remember we had our gallon glass jar. We had 2 gallon glass jars.
This is a funny story. I know where you're going.
Yeah, so we had 2 gallon glass jars, and I'm thinking, okay, we're probably going to need more than 2, like maybe 4. We're going to need like 4 or more gallon glass jars, whatever. And Eric orders a dozen gallon glass jars. And I remember him, coming down the stairs.
This big box shows up, and she looks at me, and she's like, "You're such an extremist. We don't need 12 of those." And I'm like,
said, let it consider that this is my first contribution to your business, I think is what you said at the time.
That was
12 gallons was a bit intimidating to start.
I just didn't think we needed 12. We ended up with 256 gallon glass jars in my kitchen closet before we moved out of the house, because exactly 256 gallon glass jars fit on the shelves that Eric and his uncle built in the fermentation closet.
Yeah.
Okay, so 12 or 256 to how many gallons are you doing this year?
Oh gosh.
Well, that was 256 a week.
That was 256 a week.
Yeah, we take the fermentation cycle is about a week.
Okay.
And I'm not current with gallons, and I know that's not really
tens of millions?
It's not tens of millions a week. The fermenters a couple years ago, it was like 40,000 gallons a week.
40,000 gallons.
Yeah, so it's changed.
A couple years ago.
Yeah.
Okay.
That was a lot. That was a
maybe
while
it's
ago.
120 now, but you shouldn't quote me on that. I'm not excellent with that part of the business.
This actually goes back to the question that you asked earlier, and I think that this is the question for businesses in Bend, is what's the scale and where are they serving? Like when they started Kombucha Mama, which, for the record, I wasn't really involved in Kombucha Mama other than just a little bit. I got involved, when we made it Humm.
Someone had to bring some gallon jars down the street.
Yeah, someone did. I guess that was mine. And make sandwiches. There were 4 people, 5 people on staff when we serviced Bend.
Yeah.
And then when we went to servicing Bend and Seattle and San Francisco, it turned into 20. And then when that added up to the whole West Coast, then it was 50. And then, now it's all of the United States and Canada and a bunch of other countries. So if you look at Bend's opportunity for other industries like biotech, Bend is amazing, what these companies are doing. They can create products that are shipped all over the whole world. So I think from that standpoint, Bend has a real entrepreneurial opportunity, because why is Silicon Valley, and why is Seattle, have the economic development and the companies that it does? It's because of people. It's because smart people started companies and they grew it. And Bend has the opportunity to do the same thing to whatever degree it wants to. Yep. I do think that, when we moved here, a lot of our early friends were already virtually commuting. They were telecommuters. In 2008, 2009, we had friends at Cisco, we had friends at different places that we met when we came to town. I think that'll become more and more prevalent. And I do think that affordable housing for teachers, for people that, we have to be able to support our community.
Yep.
So I don't have the solutions to those. Thankfully, there's people like you that are thinking a lot about that. But it is a big deal that how do you live and work here and raise a family? And that's materially important. There were a couple towns on our list of 25 that we crossed off because of the cost of living.
Yeah.
I don't think we would have chosen them anyway, but like they got crossed off early because we didn't want to spend $1 million on a house.
But it's not just the cost of living for you, it's the cost of living for the community.
Exactly.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
And, and I think we're at this inflection point of Bend where we have to collectively decide what we want to be. And so change involves all of us rounding our edges a little bit of what our vision of Bend should be, because it's easy for us to say growth is tough, we don't want to see any more homes built, but then we have to collectively make a decision and say, the teachers in our schools, the people answering the 911 calls, is it fair to say that they have to commute in an hour from another community to serve our community?
Right.
And I think we've crossed that point.
Yeah.
So I did a study a couple months ago. I was talking to the housing director of the city of Bend, and the average median wage, family median wage, was $78,000 or something like that. And that could afford a $380,000 house.
Yeah.
And I did a study, and at that point we had one home under $500,000
on the market.
So we virtually have zero workforce housing. Not a shortage, we have zero.
Right.
And so, this is where I like to challenge people that are saying no more growth. Growth is bad. We have to say, okay, you're in, the door's closed, but what's the future of the town?
Right.
Without some productive discussions on what growth means. And maybe it doesn't mean sprawl, maybe it means more vertical. The whole central redevelopment district that we're sitting in right now, have you seen the future overlay? Basically between the Parkway and 3rd Street, they've upzoned all this, and this is going to be the higher density vertical corridor over the next few decades of Bend, where we have a lot more, 5/1 type of buildings, et cetera.
Right.
So we're going to have more of a city feel, but they're trying to accommodate that before the sprawl. But that's not going to be comfortable for a lot of people. So I think we have a lot of change, and I don't like seeing growth either. When I first moved here about the same time you guys, we had our secret trailheads, right?
Right.
That are now 100 cars.
Right.
And we've seen, you now have to get a permit to go hike South Sister this summer.
Totally. Yeah.
So I struggle with that as
For
well.
sure.
Yeah.
But I think we're at a really interesting point, and this is a messy discussion that we've got to have.
Absolutely.
Well, I think that a big part of it, and some people, when I talk this way, think it's really Pollyanna-ish, and I respect that, and I disagree, but I get it. The quality of the discussion, in my experience, and this is in houses, it's in buildings, it's in community, businesses, the quality of the discussion is as important, if not more, than the outcome of the discussion. Okay, and here's what I mean by that. If you have a degraded quality, if we're arguing, we're not going to come up with a good solution. Almost by definition. How do two people that are arguing with each other come up with a good solution? If the quality of the discussion stays open and flexible, we don't have to agree, we just have to respect. You're going to get a better outcome. I think that one of the things that blows a lot of people away about Michelle and I that I'll introduce is we got divorced a bunch of years ago. So here we are, we go on vacations together, we co-parent our children. My wife Sherry is actively involved in all of our bigger discussions about our businesses and what we do. Obviously she is. And the quality of the discussion is maintained a really, really high level of openness. And obviously we don't agree on everything, or we'd probably still be married. And then we're still friends. We still run businesses together. We still parent our kids together. A community can do that as well. Like, people can have a much more productive conversation than we're seeing, I believe, in Bend and in the country.
So if you look at what's happening in the world today, and the quality of conversation or lack thereof gets you the results that appear, right? So you can take this from a world perspective, a national perspective, a community perspective, a business perspective, a family perspective. it's all the same. It's all about being able to sit across the table from somebody that you may or may not agree with. Most of the time, there's going to be some, you might be the best friends in the world. You're not going to agree on everything. And until we collectively, I believe, as a community, or frankly, as a species, get above, I mean, seriously, get above our commitment to our story, our commitment to ourselves being right, then we're going to continue to probably suffer through change. I mean, change is going to happen no matter what. It just does. It's just part of, it just happens. Yeah. And until we can show up in a way that we are at least open to considering what is happening, but even better, open to being a part of what we want to create, if we're not open to that, then we're just getting kind of dragged along. Maybe the easiest place to look is the places closest to you. I love, Eric, that you brought up our relationship. I mean, it's significantly changed since we started dating and got married and traveled around the world, and now we don't live in the same house, and his wife is one of my best friends, and we love going on vacation together. And we had some rocky times. I mean, there was like 18 months where we didn't really want to see each other very much at all. But we have, there was something more important than our stories at the time.
And so a lot of people listening to this might be going, yeah, but you're not really talking about anything. You're not really solving any, like, what's the solution to the housing price? What's the solution to healthcare and to all of the problems that we face as a community? Okay, the solution, in my opinion, starts with the quality of the conversation. And that's actually what we taught at Humm. When we were growing, when Humm went from 50 or 20 employees to 80 employees really quickly, everybody was freaking out. They're like, oh, we don't like it here anymore. Or we don't know if we're gonna like it here anymore. We don't know if it's gonna be a different business. And we stopped and we went, okay, the most important priority in any meeting, this is a business meeting, I don't care if we're talking about finances or if we're talking about marketing or production, is what is the emotional well-being of everybody in this room being honored and considered. Because if you're not considering that, then what kind of solutions are we gonna come for supply chain or for financial debt structure or for whatever? And people get disenfranchised very, very quickly when they don't feel like they have a voice or when their voice doesn't matter.
Right.
And if that happens in this town because somebody comes in and says, oh, I don't want Ben to change, and I'm like, well, it's got to change, you idiot. Yep. I mean, what am I doing? I'm just part of the problem now.
Right.
So I have an opinion. My opinion is that Bend is going to change whether I want it to or not, because it's such a cool place. I moved here. Look at all the people that are moving here. It's going to change. So then how do we have a conversation where people are respected and the best ideas are actually presented and people don't check out of the conversation? I think that's really what we need to do as a community. Our job is to use our brains and be creative and create solutions, create businesses, create art, create music, create all the things that we can create. And the more we do that, the more attractive the town will be. And we'll have to create solutions for traffic and for housing and for all of these things. But I don't think it becomes stagnant here at all. There's too many people that love it here, and people are creative. If I've never been to Burning Man, but from what I've heard about it, you literally have 20 people on a beach creating a party that are very interested in creating things, and then 30 years later, there's 80,000 people that go to the desert to create something. And I think that that's just an example of how humanity works. And the places that don't grow, like Green Bay, Wisconsin, where I grew up, I'm not hacking it, aren't necessarily very creative. It's actually, when I grew up there, it was statistically one of the most change-resistant places in America. Okay, great. So then you're gonna get a result from that. Bend is not that. It's obviously change-resistant because people are moving here. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I would agree with that. Most of the people that I've spoken with that were here from, let's call it the 80s.
Yeah.
Or the early 90s when the sawmills were still turning lumber.
Yeah.
They're appreciative of the change. They said, we struggled.
Yeah.
Our kids left. Our kids went elsewhere for jobs. Our kids went elsewhere for university. And our family was it was disseminated across the West because of it. We're actually vibrant. Our kids can come move home and have a job. They want to visit. They want to live here.
Yeah.
And they say, yeah, it's tough to see change, but I was able to make a living and our family was able to thrive.
Right.
And most of the anti-growth voices have been here for a pretty short snapshot in time.
They have. Yeah.
And they've witnessed change for the first time in their life. Because if you come from a bigger urban center, you don't see the effect of a couple thousand people, but here you can feel it.
Right.
Right.
Traffic is different.
Well put.
Yeah. Does complaining solve it?
No.
I don't think so.
Doesn't seem like it.
I mean, someone opened the door for you guys. Someone opened
Absolutely.
the door for me.
I totally agree.
And,
Yeah.
and that's where I think, we're saying, hey, this may seem like an intangible discussion, but I think it comes down to kind of the basics of remaining open for that next piece of change and that next person to come in the door. What does it mean to be a Bend citizen as opposed to a resident? Is there? Do you have a definition on the difference between just living here and being a participating citizen of Bend, Oregon?
Yeah, well, actually, I would say that was the key word, participating, right?
Okay.
I think that's the difference between being a citizen and being involved and being active in the community that you want to create, or sitting on the sidelines. And of course, you're not sitting on the sidelines because you're part of the town and you're, going out to restaurants and putting, dollars into the industry, et cetera. But it's kind of, I guess I'll go back to our business. So we talk a lot about culture in our business. My job title is Chief Cultural Angel. I freaking love it. It's been my title forever. And we have culture keepers every single quarter that volunteer their time. They're not getting paid extra to plan the birthday lunches, to get the food, to buy the birthday cards, to decorate for whatever holiday we're doing. They're just making it a fun place to show up for themselves and for the community, our business that we're involved in. And so one of the things that we talk about often is that culture is a verb. It's not it changes all the time with every single person that comes into our company. And you can either be an active part of that and create what it is you want to experience, or not, and get pulled around on a string and like it or not. You can't, it doesn't make sense to complain about something that you're not participating in. So I think that your distinction between the two, in my view, is how much you want to participate in what's already going to happen.
So I agree with everything you're saying, and then I've got a way that I would frame this. So the guy that is gardening with a cast on his leg that offered us a kayak, was he a citizen or was he a resident? Okay, he was a citizen. He was inspiring engagement in the community. Have you gone to the concert? Are you going here? Have you been on the river? Are you enjoying and engaging with us? We've been there a week, and he invited us in and did that very positively. Okay, he could have just crossed his arms and not made eye contact with us and not engaged. Okay, and here's the tricky part, is that when you invite somebody skiing that's new to town, or offer to meet up at a brewery, or offer to get engaged at a school, or whatever it is that you want to do, that is an act of positivity. It's an act of engagement with another human. When you do that, that creates more positive energy and people are going to want to come here. So, but the actual act of being kind, nice, and engaging with your other humans, you're going to make this a more attractive place. And when that happens, it will grow. Think if everybody in the summer of 2007 was rude to us when we came here. And they were like, oh, Ben, we don't like change. We don't want this place to grow. We probably wouldn't have moved here.
So that man lending your kayaks to you
was a ripple.
Part of the change created 87 employees.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's exactly right. Okay.
That is
so. What it just the math doesn't add up on this. Let's all be nice to each other. Let's really be grateful for where we live and be fun and positive around it and expect it not to grow. Okay, that doesn't add up. Am I making any sense at all?
You're making perfect sense.
Yeah. So if we want to just be grouchy, about all the things that we don't like about this place, we'll probably shut it down. And I don't think that's going to happen. But why would anybody want to move here if there were a bunch of, like, if it was Bergen Central?
And then why would the people that are still here want to live here?
Exactly.
You know?
Yeah, so it's cause and effect. Like, there's a positive energy that exists in this town, and I personally am an ambassador of that. You know, and people have shown that to me, and then again, that's a personal choice of how you live or not. I say no to things, and I have lots of things that I resist, but I do it in a way that isn't negative or critical. At least I try not to. And of course I screw that up a lot, but I try to catch myself, or if not, my ex-wife does.
I love that you talked about Bergens and trolls. We have small children.
I was trying to equate that, or make a sense of that, but I think you just actually brought up one of the most tangible ways we can affect change, is offering your energy, offering your positivity, and welcoming the next person.
Yeah.
And as you said that, I started having these snapshots of these flashes in my mind of all the people that did that for me.
And because of that, we have more schools, better schools. We have healthcare will continue to grow. We're attracting more kind, smart people that are going to engage in the town. And that means more traffic, and it means higher cost of living, and it means house prices go up, and it means that we have to solve some things.
Yep.
And then that's what smart, creative people do, is they solve things.
Well, I certainly have nothing to add to that. You guys, is there anything else you guys want to talk about today before we all split our ways?
Yeah, thanks for doing what you're doing.
Yeah, thank you.
Like really, I mean, it's awesome that this conversation is happening, in my opinion.